Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the State Council and State Officials webinar presented by the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, or MIC3, or MIC3, or MIC3, whatever your pleasure is. This is the second in a series of 4 webinars designed to orient people to the Interstate Compact on educational opportunity for military children. We're so very pleased that you're able to join us today. My name is David Bockel. I'm the Commissioner from Georgia, and I'll be your moderator today. Rosemarie Krager, the Training and Public Relations Committee Chair, is on the line with us as well, and it is in support of her committee which this webinar is being conducted. So good afternoon, Rosemarie.
Good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our second webinar. We hope that these webinars developed by the PR and Training Committee are helpful to all of you. As the General said, we do have 2 other webinars planned in the future, and we are open to any of your suggestions. So good luck today, and let's have fun.
Also with me is John Matthews and also Richard Pryor from the National Office. At the end of the presentation, I'll answer questions that were submitted in advance. If you have any questions following the presentation that would you like to have answered, please submit them to the email address that will be shown at the end of the presentation. But before we start, we'd like to take a moment to cover some housekeeping about how things are going to work today. So to address this, I'll turn it over to the MIC3 staff.
Good afternoon. My name is John Matthews. I'm the Program Specialist with MIC3. On the screens, you'll see to the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you will view the presentation. To the right is an example of the control panel where you can raise your hand and ask questions and select the audio mode. Please note the attendee control panel will automatically collapse when it is not used by the attendee. To keep it open, attendees can click on the View menu and uncheck the Auto Hide control panel. In the event you wish to ask a question, you can do so by clicking the hand. You'll see that here. The question may be answered at the appropriate time. If there is not time to answer your question, please submit it, and you will receive a response after the meeting in writing. General Bockel, at this time, I turn the webinar back over to you.
Great. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. So we can go to the next slide. The purpose of today's webinar is what's next. The Interstate Compact is now law in your state. How does the state start implementing the compact? What pieces are needing, and what resources are available? Go to the next slide, please. Okay, congratulations. Your state has adopted the Interstate Compact. So what's first? Well, you'll need a point of contact. And who will be appointing people? Will it be the commissioner? Will it be the state council? Will it be the governor's office? And how can the commission help you? Next slide, please. For this purpose, the Compact was enacted in 2008 with a process that has involved professionals from many stratospheres. It has continued to grow to the point where nearly 98% of military children are offered the same degree of protection afforded from this partnership. Next slide, please. Implementation and education about the Interstate Compact comes from the state coordination. Article 8 of the Interstate Compact gives each member state the ability to implement and educate these aforementioned parties about the Interstate Compact. State coordination lays out the guidelines for appointment of a state commissioner, a state council, and a military family educational liaison. Now in Georgia, I was appointed by the governor, but it may be somebody else in state government that makes those appointments. The state council, again, appointed by the governor unless it's otherwise designated. The military family education liaison is appointed by the state council, and in my case, I made the recommendation of the state council for approval. The commissioner is integral to resolving the education transition issues faced by military families. Initially, they're the first point of contact for the state, not just for families, but for other member states in the national office. They're the voice of the state. Establishing good working relationships and contacts with local, state, interstate parties is crucial. Each state must establish a state council. The appointing authority may vary from state to state. The council can vary in size depending on the size of the state, the military population, and the number of parties that want to be involved. However, all state councils have the same basic composition. And Georgia is one of the largest military presence in the country. We have 8 installations and 3 Army, 3 Air Force, a Marine, and a Navy. So we have a rather active and large state council that also includes ex officio members and school liaison officers. Next slide, please. It's a little slow, but we'll get it. Okay, there. Who can be the commissioner? The commissioner can be anyone unless specifically designated by the legislature or by law. They can be military, it can be education, it can come from a political background. The question is, how long is the term of office? The term is not limited unless it's set by the legislature or by the appointing authority. For example, if it says at the pleasure of the governor. What are the duties and responsibilities of the commissioner? Well, first of all, you got to make sure the dues are paid. Who pays it and who's the contact? The commissioner also handles informal disputes, creates working relationships maintained with the national office, with education departments, with state council members, with school liaison officers, with other commissioners, and with military installations. Where is the compact in state statute or state code? What happens when there's a vacancy? Next slide, please. State council membership must include at least the state superintendent of schools, superintendent of a school district with a high concentration of military children, representative from a military installation, one representative from the legislative branch, one representative from the executive branch, other offices and stakeholder groups the state council deems appropriate. The compact commissioner and the military family education liaison designated shall be the ex officio members of the state council unless either is already a full voting member of the state council. The military and DOD representative is appointed by DOD to speak on DOD policy. They do not have a vote or say in the actions of the state council. I will tell you, from my standpoint, I have 2 DOD appointed members to the state council, and I rely on them completely to help translate some of the issues that we're dealing with. How often does the state council meet? Well, state council typically meets once or twice a year. Now, there's some states that meet more often. In the case of Georgia, we meet twice a year. For other duties and responsibilities, consult your MIC3 Leadership and Orientation Manual. And next slide, please. Resources that you will utilize would include the MIC3 Leadership and Orientation Manual I just mentioned, the MIC3 toolkits obtained from the national office. You get to know the other commissioners who can answer questions. That was very helpful to me when I first started working on this. And, of course, the MIC3 national staff who hears from me frequently. Next slide, please. We're going to change it. Promise. There you go. The slide refers to the MIC3 website, which is the central communications hub for facilitation of activities. It's very detailed if you haven't already been there. And it's often used resource in many areas designed to facilitate service to the Commission and the general populace that have questions or require any kind of assistance. Next slide. Coming up. There we go. This slide depicts some of the training assistance devices that are constructed for use in furthering the training of state council, school liaison officers, ex officio members, and others. You may have already seen some of these, particularly there in the lower left. That guide for parents, school officials, and public administrators. Very important. You can also get hard copies of that by calling Richard Pryor up at the national office. Knowledge of the Interstate Compact at the state and local levels is important and key to transition issues being resolved in a timely manner. Now, while active duty personnel may only be in certain locations in your state, as you probably are aware, National Guard and Reserve members and their families can affect any and all school districts. And in Georgia, that's a pretty important piece because we have multiple deployments among our National Guard and Reserve members. Knowing not only that the Interstate Compact exists, but how to apply it needs to be known by officials, administrators with the state departments of education, school districts, school boards, and even individual schools. These are some of the people who need to know. Many other education-related organizations may also have a vested interest in resolving the transition issues faced by military families. Knowledge is the key. The more people who know about the Interstate Compact, the better local entities can serve their students and their families. And these are some of the organizations. Now, it's probably the same in your state as it is in mine, but not every school district knows about an Interstate Compact. Those school districts that are not located close to a military installation is where you'll find those problems. Now, the military child faces a great many challenges as the military family transfers from one assignment to the next in support of our common defense. This slide depicts some of the academic challenges that this child must overcome while being transferred on an average of 6 to 9 times during their school years. And I think I have dealt with just about every one of these, and you likely will too. And the next slide. The Interstate Compact covers students from military families from K through 12. Every time they transition from school to school and state to state, a variety of issues can crop up, and these are examples of the types of issues that you find that come across your desk. And I also should mention that DoD schools overseas also are a part of this equation. It's important that each situation is unique. There's no cookie-cutter mold that will fit all situations. So remember to gather all the information before determining how the compact applies. If you need help, consult your resources. I had one young student who wanted to be a cheerleader, and she ended up having to submit a videotape to the school district she was coming to in order to be accepted as a cheerleader because she hadn't left Europe yet. Anyway, compact content, articles of focus. Articles 4 and 7 address most of the transition issues. It's not comprehensive, but it does provide the framework. Because each issue is unique, there'll be interpretation involved. And does the compact actually apply? Next slide. Okay, next slide has to do with the role of the national office. So if we can show that slide. The national office for the MIC3 is a clearinghouse of information and resource for the commission. The staff provides assistance, answers questions, and provides materials for the state commissioners and the state councils. Okay, at this time we'll address questions that were submitted to us prior to and during the presentation. As I mentioned before, if we don't get to answer them during the presentation, we'll answer them in writing after we're finished. Now I'll ask Richard Pryor to start the follow-up process.
Thank you, General. I'd open the floor now. If anybody would like to raise their hand and ask a question to the General now, I can unmute you and you can ask the question. If there are no questions from the floor, I will go ahead with the questions we received prior to the meeting. So if anybody's got any questions from the floor, please just raise your hand as indicated at the beginning of the presentation. Okay, seeing no hands raised, General, I'll open up with some of the questions we received in the last few days. Firstly, we had one question asking who should be notified if a vacancy were to occur on a state council or in that of the commissioner's role.
Well, it's a good question because it's one that you will most likely have to deal with. In my case, I have to notify the governor's office first. because if it's somebody that the governor appoints, then we need the governor's office to take action. We had two such situations now in our state council. We had the superintendent of the school district, and we also had one of our DOD representatives. Now, the governor doesn't have anything to do with the DOD representatives, so we had to go to the Department of Defense, to the contact point there. And then, of course, ultimately we have to go to the MIC3 office and let them know who the vacancies are so they can update the roster that you see when you log on to that website.
Okay, thank you, General. Who should serve as a point of contact in the absence of a state council or a commissioner?
Well, that's a good question. There's no provision for a deputy, so I created one on my own state council. Happens to be the Deputy Adjutant General of the Georgia National Guard, and that person becomes the point of contact in the event that I'm not available, or if there's not a state council and you need somebody in authority to work the problem. For example, last November, when the MIC3 had their national meeting, I was unable to go. So the Deputy Adjutant General, who was on the state council, who I now call my deputy, attended in my place. But it'll be up to you to determine who can do it, because if there is a vote, a proxy, or something that's required, you have to work that out with the national office.
Okay, thank you. Thirdly, there are two more questions. The third one, should the national MIC3 headquarters be notified of a vacancy?
Yeah, and I believe I already answered that. Yeah, of course they should be notified of a vacancy. That doesn't necessarily mean they can affect a replacement. But in the case of the two DOD appointed members, the national office is pretty important, because the DOD is dealing with all kinds of issues in that particular office. And so I kind of rely on the national office to help me with those situations where it's a DOD appointed individual.
That actually answers the fourth question, General. So having no further questions from me, I'll hand the mic back over to you.
Okay, if we can go to the last slide. Coming up. There we go. Well, first, on behalf of the Training and Public Relations Committee Chair, Commissioner Rosemary Krager, thank you for your attendance and do for the military child. And here are the contact information you need to know for the two of us. And I'll give you a second to write those down before we go to the final slide. And there's a final slide. Okay. Hopefully you all already know how to reach out to the MIC3 national headquarters, and you know what the MIC3 website is, www.mic3.net. And that is where all of the information you need resides. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also see all the members, all the commissioners from all of the states, and you can, of course, go to them if you have an issue regarding sending or receiving school or any issues like that. So I would encourage you to do that. And if there are no further questions, I thank you for the time that you took today. And as Rosemary mentioned, there'll be other webinars in the future. Please send your questions, if you have them, forward to the national office, and we will get them answered for you as quickly as possible. So if there are no final comments, this ends our webinar for today. Have a good weekend.